Sales feed. You know, only one thing separates a great salesperson from a good one. It's not the hours they put in or how hard they hustle. It's not the number of calls they schedule or demos they deliver. It's not even how good they are at overcoming objections or how slick they are at positioning the competition. No. The difference between a good salesperson and a great one comes down to one simple thing: their passion for what they sell. Now, maybe you sell UV light curing glue used in clamshell packaging, or maybe you sell industrial shelving or insurance, or maybe you sell accounting software and you're thinking to yourself, how am I supposed to get passionate about selling something as boring as industrial lubricants? Well, today I'm going to share the fascinating story of one man, one surfer in fact, and his career is a lesson in truly understanding the difference between what we sell and what we actually sell. His simple idea went on to take over an entire industry, and the whole time he was stoked about his work. So let me tell you how it all began. It was a pleasant day in southeastern Pennsylvania, and the line in front of Nick was very long. Starting inside, it wove its way out of a set of glass doors, over the sidewalk, and throughout the flower-filled patio in front of the large building. Taking advantage of his tall stature, Nick peered out over the heads of the people waiting in line, many of them clutching boxes and bags tightly to their chests. Yep, Nick was going to be here for a while. So he just stretched out his legs from his long journey and readjusted the bag slung over his shoulder. It was a bag that contained the latest version of his own invention, an invention he hoped would change the world. Now, to understand how Nick came to be standing in this particular line, let me take you back to the very beginning. It was the early 1980s, and a young boy named Nick was growing up in Silicon Valley selling lemonade to thirsty strangers. He was just 8 years old, but Nick already knew the power of a quick buck. One day, while playing at a friend's house, Nick gazed up at a series of photos covering his friend's wall. Brilliantly colored surfboards, ocean spray glistening in the sunlight. Oh, Nick was transfixed. It was during that moment that Nick discovered his greatest passion in life: surfing. As the years passed by, Nick spent his days riding the blue waves off the California coastline. He funded his hobby by selling t-shirts at high school football games. Then, when it came time to graduate, Nick chose the University of California in San Diego, not because of its academics or its reputation. No, he just wanted a school that was close to the beach. He'd wake up early in the morning to surf the waves at Black's Beach, then he'd head back to campus for class, only to turn right around to surf some more. In a word, surfing was Nick's passion. Well, that and making people happy. But how could a young guy not be happy when he spent his days doing what he loved? Senior year rolled around, and it was time for Nick to face the future. He looked around at the people in his life, and lawyers and bankers and business owners, and realized quickly that being an adult looked like a drag. He didn't want a life filled with the ordinary. No, Nick wanted something special. So that's when he made an important vow. He was going to invent something special before the age of 30. And if he didn't, well, then he would resign himself to a real job and a life of boredom. Now, having this particular timeline in mind, it's no surprise that Nick hit the ground running. He decided to take advantage of the dot-com boom sweeping the 1990s. His first company had a simple premise, nothing too exciting. He wanted to sell consumer electronics for a markup of just $2. While selling cheap electronics didn't fill Nick with excitement, he was passionate about the idea. An idea, by the way, that failed. But that's okay, because he had another idea ready to go. And this one was a lot more exciting. Nick was going to create an online game company that gave users a chance to win cash prizes. He managed to raise an astounding $3.9 million in investments before he launched the company in 1999. But again, the business failed miserably. Nick was devastated. Nick was just 26 years old and he'd already experienced more failure than some businessmen experience in a whole lifetime. He fell into a 6-month-long period of depression. The years were ticking by and his 30th birthday was just around the corner. Day after day, Nick slept until 1 o'clock before he'd drag himself out of bed. Then he'd collapse onto the couch and stare up at the ceiling. He felt no inspiration. He had no ideas. All he could do was sit there and wonder, what was he going to do next? To finally find some inspiration, Nick turned back to his one true passion, surfing. You see, riding those waves was the one time Nick felt the most free, the most happy, the most like himself. It's when he felt inspired with new ideas with each crashing wave. So Nick organized a 5-month surfing trip around the coast of Australia and Indonesia. He was joined by a group of his closest friends along with his new wife, Jill, who he met in college. The group of friends spent their days exploring the best surf spots along the coastline, and along the way, they documented their trip with cheap disposable cameras. And every time someone caught a gnarly wave, they'd snap a photo to capture the moment, then they'd pop it into town to develop the film and admire their shots. Hoping to capture even better photos, Nick grabbed a dog leash and fashioned a sort of wrist strap for his camera. The strap fell apart over and over again, earning him a constant ribbing from his pals. But it worked well enough for the idea to stick in Nick's mind. Maybe there was something here. By the time their journey was over, Nick was actually excited to come back home. He felt reinvigorated, like a new person. He had reconnected with his passion, and most importantly, he had an idea, a really good idea. He could feel it. Now, it was time to make good on that promise he'd made himself all those years ago. He was going to invent a product, a successful product no less, by the time he turned 30. And it wasn't just the money-making opportunity that had Nick so stoked. No, he saw an opportunity to help people, to bring them real happiness in life. So Nick hunkered down to work on his idea. He became obsessed. The first thing he needed was some money. So Nick and Jill sold beaded Indonesian belts up and down the California coastline. For 2 months, they lived in their 1974 Volkswagen camper and sold belts for $60 each. It was a huge profit over what they had originally paid, just $1.90. They earned $10,000 for their efforts, money that would go towards the creation of Nick's invention. Once back at the house, Nick worked 18-hour stretches, alternating between his mother's borrowed sewing machine and a mechanical drill. He was sewing and drilling, planning and designing, trying to find a way to make his idea into something people would want to buy. He was so maniacal about his work that he wore a camelback water bag so he could stay in his room for longer periods without distraction. As for going to the bathroom, well, a sliding glass door led to the side yard, which was, well, let's say, very well watered. Finally, it was ready. It was time to introduce his idea to the world. And that's when Nick found himself in a long line in Pennsylvania. More after the break. I'm Andrew Davis, and like you, I know that sales is a tough gig. It's competitive, it's mentally exhausting, and what works today might not work tomorrow. That's why we're here to help. Who's we? Well, we are SalesFeed, brought to you by Vidyard. And we believe in sharing ideas and stories and news and entertainment to help you be more successful, to help you sell more tomorrow. You can find us on LinkedIn and YouTube and Instagram and iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, or head over to salesfeedmedia.com and trade your email address to get the best of SalesFeed in your inbox every single week. SalesFeed, brought to you by Vidyard, because we could all use some fuel for a better life in sales. One day in 2005, Nick came across an advertisement from a popular TV shopping channel. They were looking for inventors who they could feature on their program. Instantly, Nick knew his invention was perfect, so he packed up his gear and booked a plane ticket for Pennsylvania. So here he was, in a very long line waiting for his chance to share his product with the world. After hours of waiting, it was finally his turn, and Nick pitched his idea to a producer, and they loved it. When it came time for filming, they led him onto a large set with a wooden table and a huge vase full of flowers. A large display board behind the table showed images he'd taken with his camera. The red live light flashed on. The tall host turned to Nick with a smile and a twinkle in his eye. It was time to sell his invention. Now, keep in mind, up till this point, Nick had only sold 100 units for about $2,000. But that day, on the QVC shopping network, he sold an astounding 3,000 units during a short 10-minute segment. It was a big break for Nick Woodman, the creator of the GoPro camera. And things only grew from there. That year, his company earned $350,000. GoPro added more and more models until Nick was included on the 2014 list of Forbes billionaires. He was dubbed America's highest paid CEO, and his company received one of the most prestigious awards in television, an Emmy Award. All because this surfer turned businessman was determined to make people happy. He wasn't just out for the quick buck, no. Instead, he had created a product that people would love, a product that would bring his customers true happiness and joy. Today, Nick's cameras are used by the likes of Olympic snowboarder Shaun White and Hollywood director Michael Bay, the NFL, police departments, and even the US military. GoPro started as a simple way for surfers to document their most gnarly waves, but it grew into a piece of tech that would allow a whole generation of thrill seekers to film their adventures in the air, on the land, and in the sea. You know, for Nick, all of this success comes down to just one thing. Nick knows he doesn't sell HD cameras with cool features and awesome technology. No, Nick knows that what he actually sells is happiness. He sells all of us the ability to turn ourselves into one of those heroes we see on the cover of a surfing magazine or the For You page on TikTok or Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or I don't know, your office wall. You see, the real difference between a good salesperson and a great one is realizing that you don't sell software or widgets or industrial shelving or UV light curing glue used in that clamshell packaging. You turn your client or customer into their own hero. Passion for the result is the true difference between a good salesperson and a great one. And that's why Nick's first two ventures failed. Sure, he was passionate about the business models and the ideas, but passion for the product, the service, or the idea isn't enough. So ask yourself, are you passionate about your product, or are you passionate about what your product delivers? Because the moment Nick Woodman decided to make something that makes people happy is the moment it all began. That's How It All Began is written by Rachel Kraft and Andrew Davis. Our editor is Sean Cleary. Our head of research is Emily Allen. Our illustrator is Kelly Kingman. And our production manager is Elizabeth Davis. Our executive producer is Tyler Lassard. That's How It All Began is a production of Monumental Shift and is distributed by SalesFeed and Vidyard. Find us on YouTube, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next episode of That's How It All Began.